Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on integrated business management with Dynamics 365 Business Central. My name's John. I am a director with Quisitive in our SMB Business Applications Unit. In terms of agenda, I'll tell you we're going to talk a little bit at the beginning about how we outgrow accounting software, why moving to the cloud makes sense, and talk about the Business Central capabilities. But we're going to spend the majority of the time looking at the software itself and taking you through some of the great features and functions within this product. When we get near the end of the presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the migration path and some of the structure that's been built around migrations from legacy systems and how we go about doing that. And then, of course, as we mentioned, we're going to have some time for questions. So let's get started. Probably if you're here, you know very well why firms outgrow their accounting system. And there's a lot of reasons, from silo systems and data issues, processes that are broken, insufficient reporting, security issues. You know, there's acquisitions, amalgamations, restructuring, new management teams with new ideas. Frankly, just we're using an old system and we're using 20% of the functionality, and we know we can do better. And certainly something we see a lot of these days, especially with Business Central and our Microsoft Cloud products, is there's a desire in the organization to move off of legacy on-premise systems and move to the cloud. So lots of good reasons why we might do this. And of course, cloud, why cloud? Well, you probably already know a lot of this stuff. I mean, there's some big benefits to being on a cloud product, and some of the key ones are that you can stay current on the latest technology. In the Microsoft world, with Microsoft Business Applications, there are two major releases every year in the spring and fall, and you're automatically eligible to take those upgrades when they happen. And so what we find with our Business Central clients and the cloud tenant is that they're always up to speed and upgraded on the latest version of Business Central, and this is a great benefit. Certainly reducing costs and freeing up resources. If you think about the fact that the only thing you need to get to Business Central is a browser, and that the service, the backup, everything else that's required is really taken care of as part of the service, it really makes this quite compelling. And last but not least, I mean, building on Microsoft's platform, I mean, this is best practice, world-class, the #1 cloud provider out there. And there's unmatched security, reliability, and of course, privacy, all wrapped into the Microsoft Cloud offering. And speaking of the Microsoft Cloud, I always like to throw this slide up because Dynamics, the middle bubble, is what we're talking about today, and really talking about Dynamics 365. But it's really important to point out that the Microsoft Cloud vision brings into account integrations with all of the things that Microsoft does. Whether we're talking about Azure, whether we're talking about Microsoft 365 and our Office products, whether we're talking about Power BI. There are lots of integrations here, and then it's important to point out, we always say this, Microsoft integrates with Microsoft better than anyone else will. When Dynamics 365 Business Central was released in 2018, it was released on top of a code base that was known originally as NAV or NAV, and Microsoft took that product and essentially ripped it apart and rebuilt it. And at the time when Business Central was launched, there were 160,000 customers, over 2.5 million users, 3,500 partners, and 195 countries supported for this product. It has only grown since then. And the upgrade path for all of these folks that were originally on NAV is to Business Central. So I always like to start a presentation by saying this, like, you're in very good company. When you look at just the sheer number of organizations that have built their business on top of this platform. The core capability set includes all of the things you would expect in a ERP system of this size. So we'll focus today on some of these and give you a flavor to see things like core financials and of course GL, AR, AP, bank rec, fixed assets. There's a service management capability here. There's some project accounting, project management. capability built into this. There's really deep supply chain and operations here. This is really a sweet spot for this product. It's something that it does extremely well. And of course, great reporting and analytics. And again, we're going to cover some of this stuff as we go through the presentation, but it's really important to point out that this is geared at, mid-market organizations with, complex needs and businesses that include some of or all of the things that you see on the core capabilities page. To be more specific, and after implementing this product a lot and doing many implementations, I developed my own top 10 list. And these are the top 10 reasons why we love Business Central. So hopefully you'll see all of these in the presentation, or most of these in the presentation today. First and foremost, usability, user interface, and speed. I think this product sets the benchmark in the ERP industry for all of these things. This is among the newest interfaces of any ERP product out there. I think it's the best. I think it's world-class. We have seen it with high degree, lots of data. We've seen it with lots of processing requirements, and it performs really well. There's extensive use of something called filter list views. It's one of my favorite features. It's an easy way to filter data and extract data, push it out to Excel. It also acts as an action pane where you can click and go right to a transaction. This is something that is core to how you navigate around the system and how you look at statuses, and also how you do data extraction. And for those clients that have used products like Dynamics GP, Smart Lists, and it's very similar to Smart Lists there. There's an integration to Outlook, Teams, as well as Power BI, and we'll show some of this in the demonstration. This is really another important part of this, is the extensibility of the product, both within Microsoft's business applications and Office applications, as well as there are extensions built by partners to help improve or broaden the capability set within Business Central. And so just like your favorite mobile device, this product has its own app store, and that's called Microsoft AppSource. And you can go to AppSource and you can filter on Business Central, and you can see a lot of great extensions that have been built out. Now, the really fun thing about this is that when you have Business Central in a cloud tenant, you can very quickly, within a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, create a copy company. And so you can go to AppSource, and a lot of these apps have free trials. You can click on a button, it'll ask you where you want to download it, you can put it in your copy company, and you can try it out. And that makes it a lot of fun to look at, extending functionality. That's true for a lot of the apps that are on them. Some of them are enterprise level, and there isn't really a free trial. You got to talk to someone on the other side about it. But it is worth checking out AppSource just so you can see what's available there. This product comes with a full-featured mobile app. I'm going to show you that shortly. There's great search capability. It is a Google-like search, and start with a few characters and it'll bring back lots of results, and you'll see that in the demonstration. Really flexible chart of account structure, not to go too finance on everyone, but this is a 1-segment chart supported by financial dimensions, and that gives us a lot of flexibility for organizations with varied reporting needs, and it's been very popular as well with nonprofit organizations who oftentimes have different reporting requirements to different stakeholders, and this suits that really well. Now, the product is lots of API and web service capability, and that gives us the ability to do things like automatically update foreign exchange rates, or pull your bank account to see what checks have cleared through a bank feeder. And so there is capability to deliver functionality like that because of just how the platform's been built. The project module is referred to as Jobs in Business Central, and it is a really simple yet effective project module, and I'll touch on that a little bit in the presentation. Number 9 should really say Power BI, because OData Feeds probably doesn't mean that much to our audience, but OData Feeds is how we get data out of the cloud tenant and into Power BI or even Excel. And it's a really simple data feeder that any of us can configure and essentially pull up. You can pull up data in a pivot table in Excel, or you can go straight to Power BI and start building dashboards on your Business Central data. The great thing about number 9 is that all of the data inside Business Central is made available through the OData capability. So if you see it on a page, if you see a field there, if there's some data there and you think, gee, I'd like to create a Power BI dashboard on top of that, you absolutely have the capability to do that. Last but not least, and I think really important in this new world we're living in, is that Dynamics 365 for Sales, which was really known as a CRM, essentially, it's just a new brand name, is integrated with Business Central, and integrated to a point where you can run your sales process through CRM. You can do lead to opportunity to account in your sales pipeline. And as your deals move through to become opportunities, and maybe issue a sales quote and eventually transfer that to an order, that order will integrate with Business Central. The account that's created in CRM will create a customer in Business Central, and you can do bi-directional updates. If you process an order through CRM and it drops to Business Central, you can run your pick, pack, ship invoicing routine, and even after you invoice, Business Central will send an invoice record back to Dynamics 365 for Sales. So there's a lot of compelling functionality here that is really important to point out. And this is really what we've seen over the last number of years, is just, hey, this is our top 10 favorite features, and I'm going to show as many of them to you today as I can. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and open up the product, and we will take a look at Business Central. So I'm just logged in right now to as a business manager role in Business Central. So again, this is a browser-based product. It's supported on all the modern browsers, and there's lots of personalization capability. Before we go too deep into the functionality, I just want to say I picked a business manager role today to do the demonstration because, frankly, the business manager has lots of access to lots of things, and it's a great role to demonstrate from. The point about this is that we're going to set up roles that are specific to your organization and your business, and we're going to slot users into roles. And those roles are going to determine what they see as they navigate through the system. And of course, there's lots of great security here with permission sets so that we can make sure that the right people have access to the right functionality for the role they need to do. The other thing I'll just point out quickly is that inside your tenant, you can have as many legal entities or companies as you need. And so this is another feature of Business Central that's important to point out. Of course, there's region and language packages available here that give it its global appeal as a global ERP solution. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about what we're looking at. When we come into our home screen, we're going to see some interesting information. We're going to see tiles, we're going to see links, we're going to see cues for information in the system. So just quickly as I scroll through it, I've got some tiles here. They actually are color-coded, where we've got red and green, and reds are ones we want to pay attention to. We also have things like insights, where we have charts and graphs. I've got some favorite accounts that are listed here. I could list out a trial balance. I've got embedded Power BI so that I can look at my favorite Power BI reports. I've got a report inbox so that if I put any of the internal business reports in Business Central on a schedule, they'll get generated and made available here. And, I can quickly come in and see, for instance, this case, it's an income statement, which could have been delivered as PDF or Excel. Now, the interesting thing about the homepage is that when you click on any one of these items, if I click on this tile, it takes me to one of the concepts we talked about earlier, is a filter list view. So this is a filter list view page in Business Central. And what this is listing out is, hey, here's some invoices that are sitting here that need to be posted. And these are open invoices awaiting posting. So what am I looking at with these invoices? Well, I've got a list of them here, right? And I could come to look at them and review them and run a routine where I go and post a whole bunch of them. But maybe what I want to do is just take a closer look at a few of these. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on the first invoice. And what it'll do is it'll open up the invoice record itself. And so I can go do a quick review of this invoice if I need to. I can see what we're looking at. I can see I've got some missing pricing on the first line that I would probably go back and fill in. The interesting thing about filter list views is you can do more with them than just, filter on a list, more of the story than just scroll on a list of items and go ahead and click on it and do reviews. You can actually, at the top of each filter list view, you can save it to Excel, and you can also share a link inside Teams. So if you're having a discussion about the specific invoice and you need somebody's input, hey, you can just send them a link through Teams and say, hey, can you take a look at this Office Depot invoice because I've got a question about it. So this is an important part of filter list views. It's an easy way to navigate. It's an easy way to get data to Excel. But importantly, it also has that name filter. So what does that mean? Well, for instance, if I wanted to come in and say, I want to filter invoices just on Office Depot, I would go ahead and create a filter and save it. Once I save the filter, I'd have this view like I have here at the top, and I can say, okay, here's all my outstanding invoices for Office Depot. And if I needed to send those to someone, now I can just click on my icon and say, open in Excel and send them an Excel document. The other thing I'd like to point out about Business Central, and this is a good place as any to do it, is that the personalization feature capability built into Business Central is really quite modern and really well thought out. So if I come up to this wheel up here and say personalize, I'm actually going to personalize this page just for my own view. So for instance, maybe I've decided that I don't need the division to show here. It's not relevant to me because it's all sales. So what I can do is just come in here and click hide. And I'll just slide this column to make it a little bit smaller. And now my view is changed. In fact, I can say done at that point, and now forevermore, I won't see division there. Now, if I go back to the main view on this page and go back to personalize, one of the things that I can do is potentially add fields. So I've got a whole bunch of fields here that are available, and maybe I want to bring those in. So for instance, maybe location code is important. So I'm going to drop location code into this view. And now that would be here. Now, I'm not seeing anything in location code, so I'll go ahead and hide that because it looks like it's not that important. But maybe the shipment date is really important. So I'll drop that in there. So now I've got a view that actually I took out division, tried location, and put shipment date in. Now this is saved here. Every time I come back to this sales invoice view, this is what I'm going to see, okay? And that personalization feature that I showed you is available across every screen in the application. And if you're wondering why that's important, well, one of the reasons why it's important is because it allows us very simply, as you saw, drag and drop it, like click a button and hide or show, to really make sure that the information being presented on the screen is relevant to the person entering the information. Think of it another way. In the old world, we'd have all kinds of fields that show up on a screen. And if you didn't use those fields, chances are you trained people to just ignore it. Like, we don't use that field, ignore it. Well, in this world, we would hide the field so you never look at it and didn't know it was there. And personalized, there's an administrator level of personalized called design, where if you go in through the design mode as an administrator and make the change, it makes it for everyone. So, I mean, this is really important for user adoption and training and just, making the application simple and easy to understand and use. And frankly, we've seen huge benefits in terms of just how quick new users get into the application and are able to start processing transactions and how long it takes for them to get comfortable with it. And I think a big part of that is just the personalization capability that really provides a sort of ease of use within the application. Now, one of the other things that's really nice in Business Central is if I like looking at these unposted sales invoices, I might want to just bookmark it. So I'm going to go up ahead and just add a bookmark here. And when I add a bookmark, it says to you that, hey, the bookmark was added to your navigation menu on your role center. What does that mean? It means it's saved as a favorite up here. And there's the sales invoice that I just bookmarked, and I'm back to it. So, that's another nice feature that's built in here. Now, before we get too deep, let me show you a couple of other favorite features that folks have with Business Central. And I'm going to go ahead and pull in an email. So I got an email. We're using Office 365, and we're going to say, remember that this is Microsoft with Microsoft, so there's nothing better than this. In Office 365, there is an add-in for Business Central that you see here at the top. And what it'll do first is we'll talk about contact insights. So I got an email from a client, and they're asking for a quote on some stuff. And immediately over here on the right-hand side, I get what's called a fact box about the customer. And so it's showing me details like what their balance is. It's showing me, hey, if we are using Microsoft CRM or Dynamics 365 for sales, the value of the opportunities, quotes, and cases that may be sitting in our Dynamics 365 application, showing me some, sales activity, and the number of documents that we've processed with this customer. And so I really like this right away just for something simple, which is, hey, this customer has a balance of $57,000 owing to us. What's that made up of? I'm going to go ahead and look at that. I'll put that in a pop-out window. And I'm actually looking at outstanding invoices that the customer owes right now. And boy, this is 2022, so this is some sample data. So don't worry too much about the years. This is just pure demonstration data. But boy, if I was looking at this, I might think to myself, what's the 39,000 back in 2018 about? I'll go ahead and click on that. And what it's going to do is open up the actual invoice. And I think what I want to point out here is that this add-in is specific to Outlook. It is not a Business Central. It's not taking me back to my Business Central login in my browser. I don't have to be logged into Business Central through the browser to get to this. This is all being done in Outlook. And I'm actually looking at a fairly decent invoice that we're still waiting payment on. So I'm doing this and looking at this directly in the Office add-in for Business Central. And so I actually think this is a huge feature because the number of times we get emails from customers and we're like, hey, maybe that balance is an important factor. Now it will be right on the right-hand side of your email and you'll be able to see it. So another thing that happens with this add-in is that we have a capability to create from an email to actually go ahead and create a sales quote, order, or invoice, or a credit memo, or a purchase order, purchase invoice, or purchase credit memo if this was, from a vendor. So if I wanted to create this as a sales order, for instance, or even a sales quote, we'll just do a quote. I can just click on sales quote. And what's happening now is there's a little bit of OCR happening in the background where Business Central is going to read it's really going to read the contents of that email. It's going to do an association here in the background, and it's going to say, this looks like what they're asking for is, hey, we want a London swivel chair and an Antwerp coffee table. Is this correct? And if I go ahead and just click add to these and say, okay, I would now be able to go through a process of, and I could again put that out in a pop-up so it's easier to see. I could go through a process of creating a sales quote directly in Outlook and be able to actually process this and send it from this add-in without logging into Business Central at all. And so, when we think about this Outlook capability that's being delivered here, it's really an essential ingredient. And I think it's one of the focus areas that we've spent a lot of time on and shown a lot of value to customers because most everyone uses Outlook. And this is just a great feature to have there. Now, another thing I want to show you, just before we get into a little bit of the functionality, is the mobile app. And so let me just pull this over to the side here. And you can see I've got in the background, I've got the Business Central web app. And this mobile app, I like to show it in this window just because you can see in the background that the numbers are the same. So if I look at sales quotes in here, I can drill down and go ahead and see the sales quotes that are sitting there. I can go back. As I scroll through, I can see things that you've seen before, my top customers, and I can take a look at those. And again, I can go back here. I can look at my favorite accounts. I can see, hey, a trial balance. I can see Power BI directly from within this app, within this mobile app. And I can look at doing almost all of the transactions or functions that you would do through the browser directly in the mobile app. Whether it was, creating a core document like a quote order, invoice, or purchase order, purchase invoice, registering a new customer or vendor, all the way down to financial statements. And in fact, let me run one live for you. I'll go ahead and run a financial statement. So I'm on the mobile app, and I'll go ahead and pinch in, and I can actually see, hey, here's my P&L, for the current period. And I'm seeing those results generated in real time on the mobile app. So this full-featured mobile app is an essential ingredient to the Business Central story. It is what I would call an essential ingredient to a modern ERP. And if you want to give the mobile app a try, you could go to your app store on your mobile device. There is a demonstration mobile app available for free download, and I think it's got some sample data in it. Go ahead and give it a try and see what you think of it. And you'll be able to see and feel sort of the full power of what a modern ERP can do. Okay, so one other piece that gets really important with the Microsoft story is that built in and integrated with Business Central is Power BI. And so, we'll just show a couple of examples here, just because everybody likes to sort of see the end state, right? When we do these implementations, where a lot of organizations are really trying to get to is something like this, where this is how we're going to look at the business going forward. We're going to have dashboards and visuals to show the health of our organization, our business, and what's happening within it. And think of Power BI like a canvas where you can create these visuals for your organization, where you can show the trends, the KPIs, the exceptions, the outliers, and the things that people should be focused on. How you do that is by taking a data set and working in Power BI to create these views. The important part about Business Central is that it provides the data feed direct to Power BI. This we introduced at the beginning as, I said it was called OData. Maybe I should have called it Power BI integration. That is your OData feed. And the OData feeds from Business Central provide the data set for Power BI so that we can create these dashboards. They can also, that data set can also be opened in Excel, for instance, as a pivot table. Even within these visualizations, Power BI does some interesting things. Like there's drill through capability. So if I'm, this 121,000 in OpEx, if I want to drill through the KPI details, I can actually drill down to a more detailed report. And we've done some really interesting things with this for clients. I mean, we've done things like responsibility center manager, actual versus budget, and they drill down and look at, their transactions and what's going through their accounts that they're responsible for. Of course, we've done lots and lots of dashboards, to really help the organization, visualize the overall health of business. And all of these dashboards, they can be embedded directly within Business Central. And as we navigate through today, the presentation, you'll see some other areas where you've got Power BI embedded. I like to point this out. I mean, it's really an important part of the Microsoft story. Power BI on its own is something that a lot of organizations look at, never mind the underlying ERP being completely connected to it. So this is, again, just an essential ingredient. And when you look at the Microsoft powerhouse here of Outlook integration, Excel integration, right? The mobile app, the Power BI, the mobile platform, that's really what we're trying to say is, hey, this is where, the differentiators are versus those legacy ERP applications. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the structural stuff in Business Central, just to give you a flavor for how that works. Let's start with the basics, the chart of accounts. So when you look at a chart of accounts in Business Central, what you'll see is a single segment chart of accounts. And what we do with the chart of accounts is we set up, we recommend setting up categories and ranges that define the section within the chart. So if you look at AR here, starts at account 13,000, ends at 13,400. 13,400 is what we call a totaling account, and it actually acts as a grouping of the posting accounts in between these ranges that are defined between the beginning and end total. You can't post to a beginning or end total account though, and all you can do is post to the posting accounts in that range in between. Those end total accounts, like accounts receivable totaling, can be used for favorite accounts. They can be used in financial statements. They can be used in reporting. You can come in and drill down on the 5 million and it'll show you all the GL transactions making it up across the accounts that are included in that range. And again, you would be looking at, guess what it is? It's a filter list view, which means I could go save this to Excel, share a link on Teams. I could go back to the underlying entry itself and say, where did that entry come from? And, you know, hey, it's going to go look at where the entry came from. It was part of a month-end journal entry that had 52 entries in it. I'm going to spare you from looking at that. But you can see right away just how well connected everything is here. If I go ahead and just open up an account like accrued interest, this is what the account card looks like. By the way, as I'm clicking through things today, just pay some attention to somehow a little bit of the organization of these screens. Let me spend just a second on this. I can shrink this screen. I can flip between accounts here by clicking on these guys. I can go back and expand the screen. Within this screen, the sections in the screen collapse and expand. And in most of our setup, there are what we call a fact pane. So in this case, I may want to put a link or a note on here so that other people who are looking at this account can see it. When we look at the account setup that's here, we're giving it a number and a name. We classify balance sheet, category, subcategory. And then, you know, we've got some tolerances around here. Direct posting means that you can post a general ledger journal entry to this account. If you turn this off, it means essentially it has to come from one of the sub ledgers. And so there's some important setups that we do here on this account, but it's pretty straightforward. This categorization is critical. I'll show you why. Here's a summary of what happens with the categories. Let me show you the search. I'm going to search out GL categories. I just started typing GL, and let's see if we get how far we need to go. GLCA brings me to GL account categories in my search. Notice that on the search, when you do it, it takes you to the relevant page or task in Business Central, but it may also bring up some applications on AppSource, some extensions that refer to categories, or it may take you out to documentation to help you find things. It's going to go ahead and open the category list. So what's this doing? Well, it's actually showing me a summary of the accounts rolling into the subcategories, rolling into the categories. And you would say, okay, John, why is that important? Well, one of the reasons it's important is when you set up your GL in Business Central, you would come in and click this thing called Generate Account Schedules. Account schedules is what Business Central refers to as financial reports. Clicking on this will 5 seconds later result in you having created your default out of the box financial statements. So income statement, balance sheet statement, and cash flows. These will be available as soon as you set up your chart of accounts. I showed this one on the mobile app, but the structure that's being read here is coming from that account categorization. So I think one of the nice things is that, you know, there's a meaning to things that are in the product. There's a reason why we set up categories and subcategories, because we're going to use them to build financial statements. And you can create as many different versions of financial statements in Business Central as you like. You're not married to just one. But it's nice that you can have defaults that are built off of your account structure. Like, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? And, you know, it's a great starting point to building out your financial reporting library. Now, going hand in hand with the chart of accounts is something called dimensions or financial dimensions. And the dimensions represent the other ways that you want to segregate your business for budgeting and reporting capability. So oftentimes we would see dimensions like cost center or department. You know, nonprofit organizations may have focus areas or reporting stakeholders or constituents that they want to be able to report on. and budget against. For organizations that get into a lot of projects, they might have a project dimension. And so what happens here is we create these financial dimensions for folks that have used, products like Dynamics GP in the past. A dimension would be like your other segments in your chart of accounts. And so what do we do with these? Well, you create values within them. So I like to show the project one. So what does it look like? Well, you have essentially a list of values within that dimension that you can use on transactions. And as you can see here, you can also create hierarchies within your dimension set. Now, at a very basic level, if you were to look at a general journal and say, well, what does it look like when you're entering a transaction? Here's what it looks like. I enter my account and, my dimension is division and project. So I would say it's 13501 to administration and project 1000. There's my debit to prepaid. And, I've got a credit to another division and project heading off over here. There's a very basic journal entry, the basic of most basic in Business Central. Okay, but we don't rely on everybody remembering what dimensions to use on what transaction. So there's a little bit of secret sauce that goes on here. A couple of things. First and foremost, when we go back to the chart of accounts, and let me just do a quick search here on some sales accounts. When we go to, say we're looking at job sales, what I can do on this account is I can come in and say, hey, anytime somebody posts to 40250 job sales, a project dimension or value, a project value is required. In other words, you're not going to be able to post revenue to this account without tagging a project to the transaction. That's step one. Step two is then to say, well, what if the person, how do we help people get the right information on the transaction, the right dimensions? And the second piece of this is that in Business Central, we default financial dimensions on important master data elements. So for instance, on a customer record, right, and I'll just open up a quick customer record. We'll say here, let's open up Office Depot. When we set up a customer, one of the things we can do is we can set up default dimensions. So every time this customer is used on a transaction, whether it's in a sales invoice, sales order, sales credit note, it's going to default the dimension of customer group being large. So the user wouldn't really have to remember that, hey, I used Office Depot, I got to remember that's large customer group. That's going to default on the transaction for them. And this default dimensioning happens on customer, it happens on vendor, it happens on item that you might put on an invoice, it happens on the project records or the job records to help really make it easy to get the right dimensions on the transaction. And this works really, really well. And, frankly, this is, very common architecture to any of the competitive products out there. It seems like they're all built now around a single segment and multiple financial dimensions. So that's sort of the chart of accounts story. Now you also see just when I'm clicking on customer here, let's move over there and talk about the customer a little bit more. I'm going to go to School of Fine Art. And what I want to do with School of Fine Art is open it up and say, okay, we've got in School of Fine Art some information over here on the side panel. This is called the fact page, okay? And so what we're seeing in here is I haven't uploaded a picture of the customer. I know I have an opportunity out there in D365 for sales. I'm seeing their sell-to history, sales history, and lots of statistical information, all of which I can click on and drill down to, including this refund of $2,640, and I can actually take me right back to see it, okay? The other thing that happens over here on the side is that there's an attachment panel. And in attachments, what we can do is we can come in and attach documents. So we can attach a document to the customer record. We've got a check mark if we attach it. That means it'll flow to automatically show up on sales invoices or credit notes that may have been created from here. We have the capability to attach links or URLs to this customer master. So maybe it's their website. And I can come in and add a note at any time and as many notes as we want. And that'll date and stamp the note with the date of the user and it will be here as well for other people to see. When we set up the customer record, we've got name and address. We can set up, contact information. We've got some invoicing parameters that we put on here and some other parameters to set up the customer. Now, once we have a customer set up, what do we do with a customer? Well, that's where we would go do a sales order or an invoice. And, just to show you how quick and easy it is, suppose I was just going to create a quick invoice for a customer. I could come here and click new, and I'll come in here and just quickly pick my customer, and we'll do School of Fine Art. And what we're going to do with this now is, hey, we're going to come in and enter some lines. And I've set up some recurring, instructions for this customer, and we know this customer prefers no plastic wrapping. So right away, before I've even said what I'm invoicing them, I put a note on to say, hey, this customer, does not like plastic wrap. When you look at Business Central, when you look at creating a purchase order, a purchase invoice, a sales order, a sales invoice, credit memos on both sides, the form looks like it looks on this page. You have a header section where we define, all of the important things. So let me show more on here. Who the customer is, where it's shipping, the document date, maybe there's some other users, maybe there's some internal work descriptions. So there's some fields here we fill in. And then what we do is we come in, we fill in the lines. And when you put a line on this, this can be one of a few things. It could be a comment like we have above. It could be that I'm just going to sell, consulting services, and I'm just going to, tag that to a general ledger account. Or it could be that I'm selling an item in inventory. So, if we're in the business of selling, steamers or strainers or kitchen stuff, I can just come in and click on that and say, I'm going to sell them, 10 of these strainers. And just like that, I've created an invoice. I've got it totaled. It's calculating the tax. I can come up to the top here under posting, and I can do a quick preview of posting, and it'll tell me if I'm missing anything here, if I've got any errors. It would have said if there was an error, it would have errored out. I'm not seeing any. If I want to look at the distributions that will be used or the GL accounts that will be used when I post this, I click on that, and it shows me, hey, here's the general ledger distributions for this transaction. At this point, I can do one of two things depending on your setup. I could go ahead and save this and post it later, or if you're using one of the important elements of Business Central, workflow, maybe it's set up that once this invoice is entered, the user has to come in and send it out for approval request. And so this brings up another important topic in Business Central where workflow is integrated in this application. Whether we're setting up, new vendors, new customers, new GL accounts, whether we're doing transactions like I'm doing now with the sales invoice, it could be on the purchasing side of purchase order. You can set up a workflow to ensure that upfront approval is given before the transaction is posted or an action is taken against a transaction, like sending a PO out to a vendor. Okay, so that's embedded in this. If I was to click this, what we're going to see back on a home screen when you are in, when you have workflow set up is you like to have this panel here. See, I got 2 requests to approve. And so what it's showing me right now in my request to approve page is I've got to approve a couple purchase invoices, one of them for $2,500. So what I can do from here is I can go and open the record and take a look at that specific, somebody's asking for a new laptop and they're asking me to approve it. So I can go ahead and just, approve that. I could reject it. I could add a note to it or a comment. I could delegate this. So, approvers can be set up with delegates. So maybe I'm thinking, I'm going to send that one to my boss because I'm not sure I should approve this. I'll go ahead and delegate it. And, there's a lot that can be done with the approval setup here to ensure that we have the right number of approvers, whether it's one approver, whether it's multiple approvers, whether there's materiality on, what gets approved, all purchases over 5,000 subject to approval. All of that can be set up in here. And so this, again, is just another really important element to think about when you think about this modern ERP, Business Central, and how your business can evolve on it. Okay, So, back to our sales story, right? We were looking at creating a sales invoice. I'll go back to the most recent one here on our list that we did for the School of Fine Art. If I'm happy with this one and it's approved, I can put it in a batch and post it, or I can just go ahead and post it. I'm going to go ahead and post that invoice. And it says, do you want to see the posted invoice? So I'll go ahead and say yes. There's my posted invoice. There is a capability here where we can have something called job queues that would auto post and automatically email out invoices. If I wanted to take a look at this, hey, I'll go to print send. Notice the first button now is send. It's not print anymore by default, but I will print this one just so you can see what an invoice looks like in Business Central. And without, doing any dress up on the invoice or changing it, this is the out of the box invoice that ships with Business Central. And of course, we modify that and change that so that it meets your requirements, so that the outbound facing documents that go to a vendor, go to a customer, whether it's a purchase order, invoice, credit note, et cetera, are all dressed up to look exactly how you want them to look. And at this point now, that invoice is posted, and hey, it's going to be sitting in our posted invoices area awaiting payment. And I won't get into doing payments and cash receipts today, just in the interest of time, but I will tell you it works exactly how you think it would work. You could receive a payment and take a deposit and go to the bank with a cash receipt and a deposit, and tag the cash receipt or the payment to the outstanding invoice, which clears it out of AR. So that's sort of our sales side. And I'll just tell you that on the purchasing side, it's almost a mirror image of sales, where we had a customer, we have a vendor, right? Where we had a sales order, we have a purchase order. And even if you look at the windows that are in here, the way it's designed, it looks very similar, right? General, address, contact, invoice, payments, receipts. This is the vendor card. Over on the side, you've got your fact page. In this case, there is a picture there of the vendor. And, transaction history showing here. There's an attachment area where we have the documents, important links, and hey, any notes that have been put in. And so again, think of purchasing and sales as almost mirrors to each other. If you were to go look at a purchase order or a purchase invoice, let's do the purchase invoice because I showed the sales invoice before. We'll go ahead and open up this purchase invoice for Worldwide Importers. What you're seeing is the general tab at the top and the lines that are here. In this case, the line I used was not an item, it was a GL account to say I'm going to charge $65.10 for cleaning 50 hours at a certain rate. And this is the dollar value, the tax is calculated. And guess what? Just like we did on the invoice, we could go in here and do a preview posting. In this case, hey, there is an error. It's telling me, John, you forgot the important invoice number for the vendor. So we'll say it was invoice. And we'll go ahead again and just do a quick preview posting. And now it's checking it all out, and another error. It says the job I quoted on it doesn't exist. So you see, there's a lot of built-in checks and balances here to make sure that that everything is working as it's supposed to. And I think this is really just one of the important pieces about how we do things in Business Central, just making sure that before anything gets posted, it's all fixed. And you guys can see here, I got a whole bunch of validations that I need to do to have this ready. And now it'll go ahead and say it's okay. And now I can see all of the things that are going to be posted when I post this invoice, including the general ledger entries. So that's sales and purchasing in GL. One last thing I want to talk briefly about is just the projects. And we talked about the project module. It's referred to as jobs in Business Central. And just briefly, if you're doing projects, you can go from what I will call simple projects, like, hey, we're doing, maybe that one's not simple. Let's start with something a little more simple, like a training project, where we have a couple of things we're doing. We're doing some training on Business Central and some Jet Report training, and that's it, to a much more sophisticated project, where in a more sophisticated project, we have a big task breakdown structure that looks like this. And, you know, frankly, it's free form, so you can build this however you like. And this one, we have like 4 different phases that we go through. We have budgets that we track with it. It's not time and materials. We have milestone billing at the end. And if I open the fact pane over here, I have this really useful feature, which, you know, tells me a little bit like, hey, we budgeted cost at 1.3 million, of which we have 365,000 charged against that budget. We have a budgeted billable price of 2 million, and we've invoiced so far 1.4 million. We actually have $40,000 sitting in holdbacks. I've got 2 attachments sitting here as well. And when I look at this record at the bottom, I can actually see, hey, my 26.29% complete is a reflection of the 365 on the 1390. The 69% invoiced is the 1.4 on the 2 million. Why is that important? Well, the other thing the job record or the project record does is it will actually track for you unrecognized and recognized revenue based on percent complete. And so down here, what it's telling me is, hey, I've got $515,000 that should be sitting in deferred revenue, and I can recognize 507,000 of that. So, you know, this is all part of just the sophistication of how the project module works. But at its basic level, you come up with a task structure. Within the task structure, what we do is we set up budget lines or cost lines just to keep track of how our budget is going to be built for that task. The other thing that happens with the project module is that you have the capability to do timesheets. And so if you do timesheets, they're natively linked or integrated into the projects or jobs. And so we can record people's time and charge it to the appropriate tasks and cost the project with people's times, with people's costs, so we can get an appropriate profitability on that project, and lots of great reporting. So this is Business Central in a nutshell. We will just talk quickly about migration. So for those clients out there that are using Dynamics GP or SL, we do support a migration assessment program for those legacy ERP applications. And we like to talk about this is that our migration assessment objectives are to really do a bit of a diagnostic here, but a deeper diagnostic than a sales diagnostic. We take a look at, you know, what you have today in your setup and how we can migrate that to Business Central. And we will do some stakeholder review sessions and prepare an assessment document that outlines all the things you need to consider, as well as the cost both of implementation as well as licensing to move to Business Central. And so we do it in sort of a group of packaged offering where we've got a rapid, collaborative, and enterprise. And usually what we'll do is have a conversation with you to see where you fit in. General guidelines are rapid is sort of 5 users or less, collaborative is 5 to 30 users, and our enterprise assessments are for clients with over 30 users in their ERP. And then basically we run a process where we do some scoping and do a discovery. We'll meet with you for stakeholder feedback sessions and get a picture of what both the current state and future state requirements are and what you're trying to achieve. We'll do a fit gap just to say, hey, this is where Business Central fits, and this is where you may have some, some gaps, and gaps can be filled by business process change. They can be filled by an extension on AppSource, or last but not least, they can be filled with an enhancement to the product to suit the gap. And then we'll provide an overview of our recommendation and assessment document and do a presentation for you. And we'll highlight some of the features in Business Central and show you the software. So we've done a lot of these, and it really gives our clients a really good understanding of what it means to actually make this migration and what the level of effort is that's involved in it. So something to think about there. And with that, I will just open it up for any questions we might have that have come in.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. We do have a few questions. For instance, does BC have employee expense and invoice submission capabilities integrated?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Out of the box, Business Central doesn't have like a Concur type employee expense module. There are a number of extensions available that we could talk with you about for employee expenses. We also, as an organization, have built one in the Microsoft Power App, a capability that is delivered through Microsoft's Power Apps. We've built an employee expense entry, workflow approval, and submission application integrated to Business Central, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that as well. It's a really cost-effective way to process employee expenses. But certainly, all of the main employee expense vendors you would know of would be able to integrate with Business Central. Any more questions there, Kelsey?
Yes, we have, what are the biggest obstacles to migrating from GP or SL?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you're on a legacy ERP system, this is why we do the diagnostic or why we recommend the assessment, because the answer to that question is it really depends on the scope and scale and setup of what you've done in GP or SL and how you're using the product. And you know, that could mean that you've done customizations, it could mean you have integrations, it could mean you have third-party extensions built into those platforms, and those all need to be considered when you look at a migration to a new platform. So the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. It just depends. I think that the key best practice takeaway, though, is to understand and know what is involved before you commit to the migration, so that all of the things you have an answer for, and all of the things you want to do have also been discussed. And that's really the purpose of that assessment program, to flesh that out.
Perfect. And we just have one more question. What does a typical assessment cost?
Okay. Yeah. So the assessment costs really range anywhere from a rapid assessment, you're in sort of that, you know, $500 to $7,500 range, where the enterprise assessments, you know, when you're over 30 users and have a lot of different integrations and customizations, can honestly get up as high as $20,000 or $30,000. It just depends on the size and scale of the organization. You know, so it's going to be in that somewhere in the range, depending on whether you're a rapid 5 users or less, if you're 5 to 15, or if you're over that. But it is cost effective. It's money well spent. You do get a document of requirements and fit gap at the end of it, as well as a management presentation. So certainly something we encourage.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. And I think that's all the questions that we have.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining today, and certainly feel free to reach out to us with any questions you may have. If you want to talk more about an assessment, if you want to do a deeper demo, we'd be happy to chat. I appreciate everybody taking the time today to participate in this webinar. Thank you.